You know, when you're programming in C#, some of the most powerful keywords aren't really about the what, the logic. They're about the who. Who gets to see your code, who gets to use it. That's what we're talking about today, access modifiers. Think of them as the gatekeepers of your code. So, let's get right into it. So, here's what we've got on our tour. First, we're going to meet these so-called gatekeepers. Then we'll check out the two big extremes, total access versus total privacy. From there, things get a little more interesting. We'll dive into concepts like the family heirloom, the inner circle, and even an exclusive club. And we'll wrap it all up by figuring out how you can conduct your own code like a pro.
All right, first up, let's really get to the bottom of this. What are these gatekeepers, and what exactly is their job in the world of C#?
Okay, so when you get right down to it, an access modifier is just a keyword, but it's a really important one. It lets you set the rules for who can interact with your code. This is the whole idea behind encapsulation, which, if you've done any object-oriented programming, you know is a huge deal. And why should you care? Well, it's about keeping things from getting messy. Encapsulation is what protects your data from being changed by accident. It makes your code way more predictable, and trust me, so much easier to maintain down the road.
I really like this way of thinking about them. The guardians of visibility. It's the perfect metaphor, right? They're literally standing guard over your code, making the call on what's visible to the outside world and what needs to stay under wraps. Okay, now that we've got the basic idea, let's explore the two big ones. These are the ones you'll use all the time, and they're basically polar opposites. We're talking about public and private. So on one hand, you've got public. Think of it like a public library. The doors are wide open. Anybody from any part of the program can come in and use it. This is what you use for the stuff you want the whole world to interact with, your API. But then on the complete other end of the spectrum, you have private. This is like the library's restricted section, super exclusive. Only code inside that exact same class can get to it. And there's a really good reason this is often the default. When you keep things private, you can go in and change how a class works on the inside, and you won't break anything else that depends on it. Honestly, it's one of the biggest secrets to writing software that doesn't become a nightmare to maintain.
Okay, so public is wide open, private is locked down tight. But what about the gray area? What if you need something that's not for everyone, but also not just for the class itself? Well, that's where our next modifier, protected, comes into play.
And the perfect analogy for protected is a family heirloom, right? It's not something you'd put out for the public, but it's definitely something you want to pass down to your kids, or, in this case, your derived classes. So here's how it works. A protected member is, of course, visible to the class it's in. But, and this is the key part, it's also visible to any class that inherits from it, what we call derived classes. This is awesome for when you're creating a base class and you want other developers to be able to build on your foundation, but in a way that you control. It lets them extend your work without giving them access to everything.
All right, so protected is all about family, about inheritance. But what if you want to share something with your team, but not necessarily your family? What if access should be based on being part of the same project? For that, we have internal. And the analogy for this one is the inner circle. It's a great fit. Imagine you're on a team. Inside that team, you share information freely, right? But that same information is kept completely confidential from anyone outside the team. That's internal in a nutshell.
Now, in the world of C#, that team or organization is what we call an assembly. You can just think of it as your compiled project,
the final DLL or EXE file. So anything you mark as internal can be used by any other piece of code inside that same project. But the moment some other project, some external assembly tries to use it, nope, access denied. This is super useful for all those helper classes and utility functions that your project needs to work, but that you have no intention of making part of your official public-facing API.
Okay, that makes sense. We've got protected for family, internal for the team. But what if you need to give access to both? Well, CSharp has you covered with a really cool hybrid modifier.
And it's called protected internal. The name pretty much gives it away, right? It's literally just a recipe that combines the two things we just learned. You start with that family access from protected, and you mix in the inner circle access from internal.
This combo creates what we're calling the exclusive club. And here's the rule for getting in. You're allowed access if you're inside the same project, or if you're a derived class, a family member. And that's true even if that family member is in a totally different project. It's by far the most flexible option, and you see it a lot in framework design where you need really fine-grained control over who can access what.
And there you have it. We've gone through the whole lineup of access modifiers. Now let's pull it all together and talk about the big picture. Why making the right choice here is so unbelievably important for writing good, clean code that you won't hate in 6 months. This quote from the source really hits the nail on the head. In the orchestra of C# programming, access modifiers act as conductors. That's it right there. You're the conductor. These keywords are your baton. You're the one deciding who plays what, directing the entire flow, and making sure all the different parts of your code work together beautifully, in perfect harmony. So, let's do a quick recap. Here's our whole tour in one handy table. We've got public, the public library, open to everyone. Private, the lockdown restricted section. Protected, the family heirloom for your descendants. Internal, for members of your inner circle, your project. And finally, protected internal, that exclusive club for family or project members. Each one has a very specific job and a very clear scope. Look, once you really get a handle on these guardians of visibility, you're not just writing lines of code anymore. You're an architect. You're designing strong, reliable systems. So the real question I want to leave you with isn't just, do you understand this? It's, what are you going to do with it? How are you going to orchestrate your code?